catching smallmouth in June can sometimes be a little dicey. I mean, they've just finished up the spawn and it seems like, poof, they're gone. Where do they go? How do I find them and get back on them again? Well, that's what we're talking about today. So the thing about finding smallmouth is you need to know where they were spawning and where they're gonna be for summer, and then map that out, map that transition zone, that trail they're gonna take between those two destinations. I call it a bus route. First of all, they're gonna look something like, a weed edge, a ledge, a channel, something that they can follow on a route on their way out to the to deeper water. And they're going to find little bus stops along the way. Okay, this could be a secondary point or a main lake point, brush pile, rock piles, humps, ledges, clumps of weeds, things like, they're not gonna just go from shallow to deep, boom, and they're there. It takes a while. This is a multi-week process. And they'll find these little areas along the way and they'll stay there for a while before they move to the next bus stop. And the thing about that also is that not all bass spawn at the same time. A lot of people think they all spawn the same weekend, but no, they usually spawn over the course of a month or so. And the first wave will start using those bus stops, and then when they move, the next wave will do it, and the next wave. So they replenish. So you can have a spot that works really well, be a hot spot that you can catch a lot of fish on for several weeks, and then eventually it dries up because the fish have been moving out deeper and deeper. This whole process begins when that water temperature is around 70 to 75 for most of your northern states. That's usually in June. It usually begins in June and ends in early July. So that's kind of what you want to look for is, check your water temperature, make sure they're done spawning. They feed up a little bit after spawning. There's like a little week or two of period where they still stay shallow and then they start moving. So that, they spawn around 63-degree water temp, and you get it to about that 70 to 75, you can bet they're on their way out. So fishing these little bus stops is a great way to find and catch them. Now, what's important to note is not all the smallmouth go deep. Some of them stick around, they're homebodies. So some of them will stay shallow for the entire summer. If there's bait fish around, like the bluegill and the shad are spawning right after the bass spawn. So there's forage there. They're not gonna leave the forage. But if that forage sticks around for the rest of the summer, well, there's gonna be a percentage of the bass that stay shallow all throughout the summer. And along the way, as they go deeper and deeper, if there's abundant food and abundant cover, there's gonna be bass that stay there. So it kind of filters on out, and then you get this remainder of the population that ends up deep. And they set up around humps, ledges, drop-offs, main creek or main river channels, steep drops or bluffs, main points. Some of them, they like tapering points, others they like sharp points. It depends if there's other cover on it, like rocks, stumps, weeds, that sort of thing. So they kind of get scattered a bit. But those are, of all the bass, they're pretty easy to find because you find the structure and you find that cover. You can usually use your depth finder, look around. If you see any baitfish activity, then you know the bass are around. The other kind of bass are a little bit more difficult, and these are the ones that don't set up on that cover. They actually chase the forage around for the whole summer. They follow it around. And so sometimes they can be way out there, out in the lake somewhere, sometimes miles offshore, chasing schools of baitfish. And we've only become recently aware of that with the advent of FFS, forward-facing sonar. People are beginning to realize there's a lot of bass that are just out in the open chasing baitfish, and they didn't really know it was as prolific as it is. But those are harder to find because they're nomadic, they're moving around, they're here this hour of the day, and 2 hours later they've moved. It can be difficult to stay on top of them, so that's why I target the ones that are on structure, because I can find the structure and stay on top of that. And sometimes those pieces of cover will replenish. Catch a few bass off of them, and then you move on to the next one, and you catch a few bass off that, and you move on to the next one. And once a few hours have gone by, go back to the beginning, and it's replenished, and there's more bass there. Now, catching them. How do we catch them? Well, smallmouth and finesse tactics kind of go hand in hand. Tubes are excellent baits to use. throughout the year, but especially in June in this transition period. Tubes, because they mimic baitfish. So that's, and you can make them all different kind of colors, and they work for, as long as you can match your forage, you're in like Flint. So if you're in clear water, you want natural colors, the browns, the green hues, the clear with salt, pepper, or the smoke with salt and pepper colors, the green pumpkins. Those work really, really well. If you get some dingier water, then you want to throw, take some worm dye and put a little bit of chartreuse on the end of it to mimic that baitfish, that bluegill look. But you put those on a split shot rig or on a drop shot rig, and you don't have to fish it necessarily slow. A lot of people think finesse tactic is painfully slow because it's a really good tactic to use when it's slow, and then you do fish slow. But this time of year, you can fish it pretty fast and catch a lot of fish. So bringing all the tube bait along the bottom really fast, or putting it on a jig and dragging along the bottom, giving little hops and skips as you go along, you can cover a lot of water that way. Putting a football jig with a twin tail grub or a hula grub or a spider grub, as some people call them, excellent bait to use. Man, sometimes that is all they want, and you can't get them off of it. That's just the diet that they want. And all baits, fish of all different sizes on this 3-inch hula grub. I like to throw the Yamamoto 176 color, which is a cinnamon and black flake, smoke with salt and pepper in it. I like my 2 mainstay colors I use everywhere in the United States and catch a ton of fish on it. So excellent baits to use. And then anything you want on a drop shot or split shot, say for example a 4-inch or a 5-inch straight tail worm can work really, really well, like a Aaron's Magic robo worm, for example, works really well. Or the Missile Baits makes a magic worm, very similar, and they go up to 6 inches, and you can put them on a drop shot or split shot or even a Carolina rig and drag it around this structure and different kinds of cover I've mentioned earlier. Rig them weightless or weedless, and you can catch a ton of fish. Senkos work really well too, by the way. Don't discount that, especially those fish that remain shallow throughout the year. They stay shallow, they're feeding on bait fish, throwing out there a 4-inch Senko. A lot of people throw the 5-inch. I get a lot of luck this time of year in June with a smaller Senko, a 4-inch Senko. I just rig a Texas rig, weightless. Works great for me. Some people like to rig them wacky style, but for smallies, I find they're in the weeds. They're chasing the bait fish, so I Texas rig it and get that bait in the weeds. And that way it can get through the weeds without getting hung up. The key with fishing the small baits and the finesse baits is the tackle and the rigs that you're using, the line that you're using, to get the most natural action out of them. So when you're fishing those tube baits and you're fishing the hula grubs and the finesse worms, I'm always throwing spinning gear, medium power fast action rod, 7 foot, and I'm using light line, guys. I use 6-pound fluorocarbon line, straight line, no braid deleter, anything like that. And the reason for that is lots of reasons for that. First of all, braid is buoyant and fluorocarbon sinks. And when you want that bait to act as natural as possible, it's usually falling through the water column really slowly, or it's dancing around the bottom slowly. If you got a buoyant line pulling and tugging on it, it looks unnatural. The bait just looks way more natural and normal if you're using fluorocarbon line. There's a huge difference in my opinion. So I use fluorocarbon straight up, 6-pound. Now 6 pounds seems awfully light, and it is. It took me a long time to get used to that. I started with 10-pound, and when I got confident with that, I moved to 8, and then finally 6. When I realized, you don't get the nicks and scuffs and issues with line as you would think with 6-pound line. I've caught some pretty hefty fish on 6-pound line, believe it or not. So it's pretty durable, and actually it's more durable in rocks than braid. It's more abrasion resistant, believe it or not. So I use 6-pound line. I like to use Seaguar Tatsu line for this purpose. It's really light limber, or the R18, which is really super limp. That's from Japan. That's a really nice line. And I use that for these finesse tactics. Gives that bait just a lively, natural action. And I'm using thin wire hooks. Really thin wire hooks, like the Gamakatsu hooks. I like to use those because they're super, super sharp, thin wire, doesn't take a lot of effort to set the hook. So you've got this rod that's pretty limber. You've got fluorocarbon, which has some stretch to it, and you want that. Once you hook that fish, That rod is going to give when the fish surges. The line's going to give a little bit of stretch to it, so it's not going to put all the pressure on that hook. And with that thin wire hook, it's really easy to set the hook. You don't have to reel down and, you know, nail them like you're, you know, pulling fish out of weeds. You know, it's just it's a light hook set, and you just kind of reel into it, just kind of lean into it, and they're set. And then the rest of the rig just works in concert. You got a reel on there with a really good light drag on it, solid drag. Set it light so it peels off easily, and boom, you can catch those fish. And you catch a lot more of them using that setup than you would with heavier line and with braid. Trust me on this one. Been doing this for a long time. So that's how you find the fish in June, and that's how you catch them. Hope that helps. For more tips and tricks like this, visit bassresource.com.